It's great to be here in this very beautiful place with unfortunately bad news, and that is that the world is going to end soon. And that's the context in which we probably should now do educational reform. At least it's the premise in which I'm going to start with, that we know enough, and there's a massive literature on this, that a bunch of complex interacting systems that humans have set out of control are interacting with each other to make what used to be very low probability events, things people called black swans, common. Right? We're going to live in a world in which the unpredictable, the rare, becomes common. I've listed some of these. The list could be much longer. And I could literally give you a talk on each one and how each one by itself in about 20 years will bring the world to its knees. But when you think about them interacting with each other, then it's, in my opinion, for any country, my own or yours, silly to continue to think about business as usual, right? Because we have, the schools we have, whether they're in Norway or in the United States, were not made for this world. It's not even clear they were made for the 20th century, but they were not made for this world, right? And the debates we are having are not made for this world. For example, you know, in the United States, we have a lot of debate about how can we make our kids better at math so we can beat the Chinese. Well, I tell people in Manhattan, a much more important thing would be get all the kids a snorkel, because they're going to be underwater, right? And it won't matter much how good your algebra is, right, when you're swimming out of Manhattan. So this is real. The world really wants to deny it. One that I would love to talk to you about, but we don't have time, is the dark web and hacking. I will mention something about, because I think my prediction is that's the first one that will bring the world to its knees. And few of us know about it, right? Unless you're evil, you don't know about it. Now you can ask why I know about it. All right. And I will have stuff to say. So I want to talk about what would it be like to change the discussion we're having about literacy in schools to one that is fit for this very high-risk, fast-changing world we're going to see. And to do that, we have to realize that not only are our schools based on a different time period that isn't coming back, but they are also based on a bad theory of learning. You know, they're based on a theory of learning that was predominant in the early 20th century. And they are built around ways in which humans do not learn well. All right, so the first thing, if we're going to talk about new ways to think about schools and schooling and learning in a new world, we have to get straight how the human mind works, because it's humans we're educating, not Martians, right? And we work in a certain way. Now, the first thing I think you need to understand about how human works, and this is work based on modern theories of mind. They're about 20 years old in situated cognition, embodied cognition, distributed cognition. The first thing you have to realize is that we've had memory wrong for a long time. In the way in which a computer has memory, that is, it's accurate storage. So you put it on the computer, you can pull it out and look at it and put it back, and when you put it back, it's just the same as it was when you took it off. It's accurate. In that sense of memory as storage, human beings do not have memory. Now, the literature on eyewitness testimony, I don't know how this is played out in Norway, but there's a lot of literature from the 70s in the United States that shows that eyewitness testimony is virtually worthless. Right? And that's because humans don't have memory. They cannot give accurate recordings of the past. And the reason for this is what we call memory in human beings is not past-oriented for the most part, it's future-oriented. That is, the way human memory works is we have a long-term memory storage in our heads, and that storage is nearly infinite. Right? It is, no one's really caught the limit of how much you can put into your long-term memory. See, unlike a digital computer, memory is not expensive for the human brain. So what happens is human beings store the experiences they're having in life. All the experience you're having in life, you store in your head. And you store that experience in your head not to get nostalgic about the past, but to use it later when you have to plan for action and learning. So what you do, let's say you have to solve a problem. Like, how am I going to give a toast at a wedding when I hate the bride? Right? So you then call up all your experiences of weddings and you say, well, what would happen if I do this? What would happen if I do that? You know, you can role play in your head. You can think what might happen in your head. So we plan and then we act based on that planning. And so those memories are being used to make predictions about what will happen in the future when we do stuff and need to solve problems. Now, if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, any memory system like ours that worked well for solving future problems, but was inaccurate about the past, would still go on, because your survival depends much more on being right about the future than the past. Right? You see what I mean? To whatever extent we became so good at self-deception and so good at using, because every time humans use a memory, they change it. They reconstrue it and change it to get it ready again for the future. In evolutionary terms, we got so good at that future orientation of memory is now well embedded as one of our best skills. But we keep relying on it as if it was a good storage for the past. Many a person in the United States has gone to death row because of bad memory. All right, so memory is there to future. So the way that human beings learn is by having experiences in their body and putting them in their head, and then using them to think and problem solve. Now, I'm going to say a lot more about that and about its implications. So long-term memory, I can barely see this in the sun, is really an edited version of the past. When you've had an experience, you pay attention to certain things, you foreground certain elements, you store it in your head almost like a movie that you've edited, but you edit it in ways that will make it useful for future learning, future problem solving. All right, now I want to go on to two things. I've just told you that when we say humans learn from experience, we really mean they used past experience as memories to get ready for action in the future. But there is a second thing that people use experience for that is linguistic, and right now is the thing I want to talk about, and that is humans use the experiences they have had in the past not only to get ready for action in the future, but to give meaning to language in context. Right? Now, this is what I'm going to call situational meaning, and this is going to be a very important part of the talk. Language has meaning in two senses. One sense is kind of at a grammatical, systematic, general, basic dictionary level, right? I'm going to get to that later. But in another sense, it has situational meaning. That is, any time a word or phrase is used, in that particular context or situation, you have to give it a nuanced, specific meaning, not its generic meaning. So a trivial example would be, the coffee spilled, go get a mop. The coffee spilled, go get a broom. The coffee spilled, stack it again. Or, big coffee is as bad as big oil. Do you feel what your mind is doing? You are resituating coffee from liquid to grains or tins, and then, because this capacity to make up situated meanings, to make up meanings that are appropriate to the situation, is an active capacity in your head, you can actually do it and make up meanings that you've never heard before, never seen before. So not any of you, all of you can give a meaning to big coffee is as bad as big oil. Boy, this may be the wrong country, at least the Norwegians, for saying this. At any rate, you guys probably don't have this, but we Americans have a very contested relationship with big oil. That is the oil companies, because they keep screwing us. I hear yours behave better. At any rate, so all of you were able to say big coffee is as bad as big oil. You gave a meaning to that. It means, oh, there's some corporations that sell coffee and they're powerful and fixing prices and stuff. You've never heard it before, but you made it up. All right, get going. Here's an example of how you can just make up an appropriate situated meaning. Let's say I asked you, what are the 3 things you'd save in a fire? right? You immediately will think from your past experience and assign that phrase, the 3 things you will save from fire, meaning. Different for each, well, I don't know. I'm reading a book on people in Denmark and Norway, and they say you're so similar, you probably all thought of the same 3 things. But other people would think of 3 different things each, right? And this is what one guy thought of. I bet you none of them thought of that. But so you see what I mean, though? You proactively make up meaning, and you can give meaning to phrases that you've never heard. And you actively can feel yourself doing that from experience. Now, before I go on with this, I don't want this point. This is the point that's going to have the most bite for education. What I'm arguing to you is the experiences you've had as a person in your life are the foundation of your education, your thinking, your planning, your problem solving, the meaning giving you do in life. And so what experiences our students have had and what they get in school are deeply consequential. And it is especially deeply consequential in places like in the United States, where they're getting very little experience in school. They're just getting a bunch of textbooks, right? All right. Now, the coffee example is not very important, right? Let me give you an example of situating meaning, that is giving meaning to stuff in a concrete situation that is quite consequential, not only for school, but for the world. So, and this lets me get back to this contrast between language as a system, a grammar, and language as situation. So let's say in English, at the system level, we have a set of different categories for governments. We can have democracy, oligarchy, plutocracy, and a whole other republics. So that's just a set of categories. There's a system, right? What does the system do? It gives us a grid to put on the world. Here's the set of categories by which you can view the world. By the way, America's plutocracy. I think you guys are a democracy. We could actually be an oligarchy. That might be a better thing. And then, here's another. We have a set of terms for types of governments like capitalism, socialism, communism. By the way, to the Americans, all the Nordic regions are communists. You are all communists. See, so that's at the system level. The system gives you a set of categories. You have to have some set of categories to view the world, right? And so any different type of language gives you, including the language of mathematics, gives you a set of categories. But remember, the minute you use one of the words from those categories in the real world, you have to also give it a situational meaning, a nuanced meaning. So let me take this example. What would you say, at least at the level of system, that is general meanings, what would you say democracy means? Just at the everyday level, comparing democracy to dictatorships to oligarchies, what would democracy mean? Well, here's what it would mean to me. Tell me whether you agree. Democracy is a system where people vote directly or vote for representatives. Does that ring a bell? I mean, will you buy that? Yeah, my book tells me you guys don't talk much either. All right, well, that's what it means, I think, in the American dictionary. By the way, again, we're not a democracy. So democracy means people vote for representatives. Now, here is a quote from a very prestigious blog about a man who is very famous, Milton Friedman. He won the Nobel Prize for Economics. Has anybody ever heard of Milton Friedman? So, see, American audiences now say no, have no idea who the guy was. He was a very influential man. He was the founder of the Chicago School of Economics. All right, so here's what the blog is saying. Yet I believe Milton Friedman is right, that thoroughgoing restrictions on economic freedom would turn out to be inconsistent with democracy. Now, I want you to ask yourself, what does the word democracy there mean? Could it mean voting? He's saying thoroughgoing restrictions on economics is inconsistent with democracy, which must mean that a democracy could not vote to have economic restrictions, right? But wasn't a democracy defined by voting? How could you stop a democracy? It could be a stupid vote, right? You get my point. This is actually contradictory, because it's saying that if a democracy voted to, for example, put heavy constraints on wealth, then it wouldn't be a democracy. But the vote, by very definition, made it a democracy. See, so what this shows you is that now we are at the level of situational meaning. That is, you have to go in to your past store of experience and ask yourself, what in the hell could that mean? Now, if you've had the experience, the right experience, which would mean knowing about the Chicago school, knowing about Milton Friedman, knowing about the people he trained to give rise to the Brazilian school, knowing about the World Bank and the IMF's policies, the American spread through South America. You know, I'm a baby boomer, I know those things. Then you can assign that meaning. But if you don't know that, it looks paradoxical. So here are the things you'd have to have experience of, either through reading or media or news or something, or, by the way, discussion, dialogue. The Chicago school, you'd have to know why. What is that? You probably want to know that the World Bank instantiated the Friedman's policies in policies that then were put into the world. That primarily they were put in by force in South America, that is in the age where people were disappearing and being killed. That gave rise to a military policy of how we set up government change in South America so that the society was ready to accept Friedman's type of democracy. That whole issue of Friedman's type of democracy is really at the heart of the activists that oppose world trade. You don't need to know this, but there was a recent Supreme Court decision called Citizens United that basically ruled rich people can buy elections and ended whatever tiny democracy we still had. So if you knew all that stuff, and by the way, if you want to know all this stuff, there is an absolutely mind-blowingly good book by Naomi Klein called System Shock, which is about all this. Then you will know that what Friedman means when he says this is that he's got a theory that says in a social contract, let's say we imagined a social contract in which a group of people, like us, we're going to say we're going to buy into a democracy together. We're going to decide, should we all be in a democracy together? Friedman says what's going to happen is 50% of the people will have more money than the other 50%. And whatever the bottom 50% is, it will be to their advantage once voting starts to vote to take away the money of the richer guys. So the richer guys in no sane world would join the democracy, right? Because they're going to expect the first thing that you guys, you can be the poor guys, you're going to go take their money. You're going to level the playing field. So the only way, he says, that you can make a fair social contract is everybody'd have to agree that in a democracy you can't vote on economic redistribution. By the way, this was exactly what was put into South Africa after it was freed from apartheid. You see what I mean? So that's what it means. The situational meaning of democracy there is a democracy based on a notion of a social contract in which the wealthy would only join it if you protected their money. Right? If you don't know that history, you don't know that stuff, then you don't know that. Why is this important to know? If you read Klein's book, this did a lot of damage in the world, and is still doing it, but it did interminable damage, this idea. You know, we have the highest inequality in the United States in history. The world is on its way to the highest inequality. In 2016, for the first time, 1% of the world will own 50% of all the wealth. They will own more than all the other 90%, and this is where it came from, right? One of its origins. So here we see situational meaning isn't as trivial as coffee, right? And I would say an educational system that hands you a book with this language in it, but not the experience of reading, discussion, media and stuff, and history to tell you what that really means is not an education, right? All right, but I'm just giving you this as an example of situational meaning. All right. By the way, just show you could do this as an exercise. Here are 3 different uses of the word democracy. That the mayor of Columbia observed that high-quality public pedestrian space in general and parks in particular are evidence of true democracy at work. See, so again, if you wanted to know about situational meaning, you'd say, well, what does he mean by democracy? And what's particularly interesting about this is Friedman's theory is against any publicly owned land. Right? His attitude, everything should be owned. And here this guy is saying the quality of the land that isn't owned by individuals but owned by the public is the test of a democracy. And Friedman would say the test of a democracy is that no land is restricted from wealthy people buying it. Right? So there, you'd have to, these guys obviously don't agree. All right. So I'm saying that in any dealing with language, a person has to know the language both at the level of system being the categories available to me, but also has to be able to put those categories into action, into real situations. Now, the other thing to say is, if you know my work on discourse, there is no such thing as one big language like Danish or English or Russian. We speak many different varieties of language, many different registers, what I call social language, the language of mathematics, the language of Yu-Gi-Oh, which you'll see in a minute, the language of civil government. I mean, I guess I was hearing a little bit at lunch about, is it new and old Norwegian? Right, so those are two different languages. So it's not one thing. And but the way in which I was introduced at a gut level to the importance of situated meaning, that is meaning coming out of your experience, and the worthlessness of texts that you can only read at a system level by knowing generically what they mean, knowing in general what they mean, but not being able to see in your mind what it looks like, was when 11 years ago, as a very old man, I started playing video games. When you play your first video game in your late 50s, it is an enormously frustrating experience. And I always say to people, if you're middle-aged and above, do not do it unless you have a very high level of being able to put up with frustration, and unless you're willing to lose your hair. Now, when I was going to do this for the first time, I did what any baby boomer would do. I read the manual. Now, the manual was only 20 little pages, but it had 199 bolded headings. And under each heading was a technical definition in technical language, cross-referenced to the other 198. So the first thing I want you to notice, this was damn boring. But the second thing, and I've used this for years now, because this is a light bulb moment in my memory. This is the page of the thing in which I gave up. And when I got here, I'd read about 5 or 6 or 7 pages. When I got there, I said, I understand every word. I'm an English speaker, and there's no esoteric words here. And I have no idea what this means. No idea. And furthermore, how would I even use it in the game? I wouldn't even recognize the stuff. And so I said at first, I have a PhD, and I'm so stupid I can't even read well enough to play a video game. But then it dawned on me, my son Sam never read any manuals. He was 6 at the time. So I just started playing the game. Horribly. Remember, I had hair even then. And I was playing this game for hours. And then I came back, and I looked at this passage, and I literally could not recall why it wasn't just simplistically clear. It was just absolutely lucid. I couldn't even bring back the feeling of frustration. Why? Because every word and phrase now was associated with an image, or an action, or a goal, or dialogue in the game, or an experience I had in the game. Now, remember when I say you're using your memories to now fill up the world with meaning? I now had hours of meaning from that game, and was able to mix and match that memory onto here. Another way to put this language is about a world, the world of that game. And if you have not lived in that world, you cannot give situational meaning to this language. And if you can't give situational meaning to the language, only system meaning, then you can't play the game. All you can do is read and get bored, right? So that came, for me to see, although I should have known, by the way, that's true of all language. So here is a piece of language from a high school science book. And I want you to think about this exactly as we just did the game manual. I want you to say, okay, if the game manual was about a world, and you had to have lived in the world to be able to give situated meaning to the language, what is this text? What world is this text about? See, now for Americans, that's a tough question because they take things like physics or geology, they take them to mean a list of facts that Moses gave people. Right? It's just a set of facts, somebody wrote them down, and you memorize them, then you know physics, and then you know geology. See, but that is not what physics is. Physics is a set of activities and tools that physicists do in order to generate knowledge. It's a game, and they do it in the world. So this is the manual for it. And just like the game manual, and I'm going to convince you this is true in a minute, if you allowed the children to experience the world of physics in the way that I was able to experience the world of gaming, that is, as something to do, problems to solve, and by the way, a community of people helping you, because gamers don't do it alone, then this would be viewed as just as clear, lucid, and easy as I came to view the game manual. And like the game manual, then you could use it for your own purposes. Right? Now, what I'm arguing is that in our schools today, too often, it's like we give the kids game manuals, but not the game. Right? And again, do any of you have children who play games? See, gaming is much less popular here than in every other country in the globe. Every time I've asked that, I mean, even in Andean forests, half the audience raises their hands. At any rate, in the United States, if you were to say to a kid, it's been a really harsh year, so at Christmas we don't have much money, so I got you 6 game manuals, but I couldn't afford the games. Johnny, in our country, he'd shoot you because he has a gun. So, at any rate. But, all right, now, so I've gotten to the point where I'm telling you how important experience is. But I've kind of lied to you. And the reason I've lied to you is this, is it turns out that if human beings are having experiences, and these are the things they're going to put into their head to get ready for future action, it turns out that the experiences they're having work best when they have certain features. That is, it is just sending your toddler out, say, imagine I have a 2-year-old, say, well, go out there and experience the pond, I'm going for a drink. That's not going to be the best learning experience for the toddler, right? It will be a learning experience, but it won't necessarily be the best. The best experiences, this by the way for children and adults, the best new experiences for learning have to have certain features. They have to be what I will call well-designed. Right? And when we now realize that people learn not just from experience, but from well-designed experiences, you should be asking, but who designs them? Well, who designs the little toddler's experiences? Their parents, right? The good parent doesn't go to the bar where the toddler's drowning. They go out there and see to it that that experience is going to be structured in a way that it will be useful for the future of the kid, because the kid's going to have a future. All right, so here are the core features that well-designed experience has to have. Right, is that any experience that is going to be most fruitful for human learning, that is going to get into the head in a useful way. The first thing is, if you're in an experience and you have no action to take, no goal, then that is not a very good experience for future learning. Because having a goal or an action orientates you in the experience. This, by the way, this is claims, empirical claims in psychology, where this stuff has been, studied empirically. Humans think best in an experience when they have an action they need to take. The second thing is they think best. This, by the way, is probably the oldest result here. I mean, there's innumerable evidence for this, that when that action matters to them emotionally. right? What is happening here is really core to human learning. It turns out that the human brain, when it learns anything, whether it's learning French or physics or anything else, that the human brain can process that information in the cortex, which is where our higher order thinking goes on. But it can also simultaneously process this in the amygdala, an older part of the brain that puts an emotional, affective coloring on the information. When human beings process information both at the cortex level and the amygdala level, that is where they put an emotional coloring on the information they're trying to gain, then they store it more deeply and they integrate it with their other information more, right? Now, by the way, any teacher knows that kids learn better when they care, when something's at stake. By the way, the literature on sociobiology has shown for a long time humans and all primates think, well, if something's at stake, they're going to lose something. And if there's nothing at stake, the thing is put to them as purely abstract, they don't think well. You know, take the classic case where Piaget said little kids can't conserve. So if you put 10 little buttons and you out widely, and then push them together, they will tell you there's more in the big line. They can't conserve. They can't count that there's 10 in each. And but you know, there's a cottage industry and people studying children that show you can always get a child to do something. If you make those M&Ms, he can conserve like hell. Right. So, and then finally, the trouble with learning any creature who's built to learn from experience, that is, to get experience stored in the brain so you use it, is that it's too much in it. Experience is overwhelming. It's multimodal, right? What we're doing here is three-dimensional. There's all sorts of stuff to look at. And so newcomers can become very overwhelmed and not pay attention to the right stuff. So something must help you organize your attention. Pay attention to this. Background that. No, that's not important right now. So those three features are the features of well-designed experience, and well-designed experience requires teachers. God, that is hard to see. No? Okay. It's going to give, can anybody see it all? Yeah. Okay. Does anybody know what game it's from? No. You know, I don't get this because the book I'm reading says you guys, you know, don't work the way Americans do 80 hours a week. What are you doing when you're not working? Let me give you an example of what I mean by controlling your attention and how crucial this is. This is from a game called Metal Gear Solid, and if you could see it well, it's a typical 3D game. It's a realistic world. Right, I mean, it's just like the world we're in, and even more modern games are even more like the world we're in. And yet you're a player with a goal. See, video games represent the conditions for learning well. You have a goal, you care about it because you want to win, but they also have to handle this, how do you pay attention? And in the goal here, it's a stealth game. So the goal is to get by people and solve problems and save the world without killing people. And therefore, you have, in your Solid Snake, so what you have to do is, how should you, as Solid Snake, look at the world? What is important and what isn't? So one of the things you have, which is kind of like the system, is you have a map. And this map gives you the very basic system here. There's you, the white guy, Solid Snake, and then the cone of light is where you're looking. The bad guys are guards. This is where they're looking. And then there's objects to which can block their sight or which you could hide behind. That, if you look, that's the grammar of this game, period. Right? Now that's a lot less realistic than that. See, but what you've got to learn is to look at the game something like this. You've got to say, look, the really important thing here is knowing where people are looking, whether their line of sight is hidden or not, and also to be careful of where body postures and movements, because I have to wait until the things change in the lines of sight or predict where he's going to look next. It doesn't matter whether there's a nice chest of drawers there or a wall or a desk. It just matters how are these spaces occluding sight and how is bodies working. So, you know, I need to pay attention to him as a body, not a dot. because I want to predict where is he going to go. I don't need to worry about the nice carpet or the color scheme. You know, there's one game I played early on. It's a gorgeous game. It's on an island, and they did everything to make it look perfect. So this little, you know, sea ponds full of the most beautiful fish. It's a shooter. And the first thing you do is you look in the fish. Oh, what pretty fish. You're shot right in the head. You're dead. You get very clear. And then you say, what did you put the fish in for? You're never going to see them, because the minute you stop to pay attention to the fish, you're dead, see? But in this, no fish in this game. All right, so you see my point. Because a well-designed experience, because of this teacher telling you how to manage your experience, is giving the kid, like if they're in a science lab, if they see it as too concrete, they can't do anything. And if they see it as too abstract, they can't do anything. They have to say, what's the important stuff here? Right? So this type of thing where you have edited out the unimportant stuff, foregrounded the important stuff based on your past experience of what's useful and not, is called in the psych literature a situational model. This is the model you have in your head from past experience that says this is the best way to use it for reasoning. For this purpose, the purpose of playing this game. You would change it for another purpose. All right. So this does give rise to the fact that teaching is important, right? The person who's going to well-design the experience. And this is going to get to the point I'm going to make, though. It changes the role of teachers into designers. All right. So now, as part of the work I've done on games in the United States, we've spent, about 12 years now really showing that out-of-school learning is very rich, right? The kids with digital media and the maker movement and all this stuff, that these kids are learning in deep, collaborative ways that is very different than how they're learning in school. So there's this big thing that there's actually like two competing school systems. The one the kid goes to that's called the school system, and then there's the out-of-school stuff that they do with other kids. It's gotten deeper and deeper and deeper, right? What I missed in that work is that just as out-of-school learning, or some people call informal learning, has gotten ubiquitous, so has teaching. That teaching is now ubiquitous. There's tons of out-of-school teaching as well because of this needing to design experience. Now, I'm going to give you a quick example of how this out-of-school teaching and learning works. And I'm going to use a couple of games, but my point is not to do it with games. It's a point, how does it work? You could do it with all different things. You don't have to do it with games. So this is a Yu-Gi-Oh card. Anybody know what Yu-Gi-Oh cards are? Anybody have kids that have ever bought a Yu-Gi-Oh card? I am going to do a survey what you guys do in your leisure time. It's got to be really interesting because you're passing up all the stuff that seems interesting. Yu-Gi-Oh is a card game that 7-year-olds on to 30-year-olds play. It's got 10,000 cards. It's a very complicated game. You have to take 40 cards, make it a deck of just the right type for the strategies you need. And you can't play it unless you can read. And the thing about this game is it is in complicated language, just like that science thing, right? So here's one of the 40,000 cards. First of all, it's a classificatory system, so you got to understand that. When this card is summoned to activate one of these effects, target one equipped card equipped to a monster in the field, destroy that target. Target one equipped card equipped to a monster in the field, equip that target to this card. You enjoying this? Does anybody have any idea what it means? Do you see how frustrating it'd be if I then said, okay, you read the card, now make that move in the game? I mean, that's what we do in school, right? We gave them a thing, and then you said you're supposed to do something. Now do something with it. You say, what? I have no idea what it means. And they say, well, what word did you miss? You don't know what card means? You see, this is how kids feel with their science book. Now, if kids argue over the rules, and some of these 7-year-olds get Talmudic over this, what is the exact interpretation? They go read the rule book, which is, I think, 100,000 pages long on the internet. And then they read stuff like this. In order to psycho-summon a sacro monster, you need one tuner. Look for tuner next to its type. The tuner monster and other face-up monsters used for the psycho-summon are called psycho-material monsters. The summon of their level is the level of psycho-monster you can summon. By the way, it's not your English that's the problem. I have no idea at all what it means. All right, so you see though, the Yu-Gi-Oh company has a really interesting problem. They want to make a bunch of money. They want to sell hundreds or thousands of cards, but the cards have, like, you know, college language on it. So how am I going to teach it? Well, they don't hand people the rule book first. What they do is first of all, they make movies, books, and television shows, all of which narratively act out the rules so that you can see them in a grand narrative. Then they have tutorials that you can have on the internet, or you can go into what I've called an affinity space, an interest-driven space on the internet, and get a coach, or get guidance, or get training, or get a tutorial. Or you can get a computer version of the game that dumbs it down so that you go through easier and easier versions until you get... In other words, there's a whole system of how to show you what to do and how the language is married, how it is married to the situations, right? So you you play, then you realize, oh, that's what that meant. Then you can go look at the rule book and say, learn a little more. Then you can go back and say, okay, now that's what me. You know, it's a constant dance, but it's a social dance because you get to choose. If you like didactic lectures, there's an 11-year-old that has one. And you can do it. If you want to be coached, you can do it. If you want to play a game on the computer where they just give you hints, you can do it. See, but you can also go watch it's multimodal, it's convergent media. Go watch all things. That narratively acts the roles out, see? Whole system. My point here is whole system of different things to ensure the kids can read this, and they want to ensure it so they can make money. So the reason I've got this up there is I want us to start thinking of teaching as designing and resourcing a learning system with moving parts. That is, let's not just think teacher, what's being taught. How do you Yu-Gi-Oh this? What are all the tools I could use? What are all the participant structures? What are all the ways I could network people? How can I have ways for some kids to build part of the curriculum? How can I have kids who want didactic stuff doing this, but how do I build a system like they do that constantly marries the world and the words, right? Now, just one more example. Dota 2 is a very popular game, very complicated, hundreds of characters you can play. It too, therefore, has to have a teaching and learning system. These are some of the characters. And I have a student writing a thesis on this. This is what I would call the distributed teaching and learning system of Dota. You can make choices. You can go get direct tutorials. There's a whole library of not just books, but videos to see how it's done. Some of them commentated on. You can get guides written by fellow players that specifically for your level give you advice. You can go online and get a coach, a real person, to coach you at the appropriate level. You can go off and people will have all sorts of tutorials and diagrams of how to build up your hero, you know, how to choose what to do with them so it will work. You have what's called theory crafting now in all games, a community of people that try to study the game so they understand its underlying statistics and then help people understand what that means for how to play. There is a channel called Twitch TV. Have you guys heard of Twitch TV? It's very, very big with young people, where you can watch other people's games or even competitive games, often with commentary so that you can learn how it looks to play them, get hints and everything. It's like a network. You can just keep watching it. And then, of course, there's all sorts of forums where you can ask questions of each other. Well, what do I do in this situation, or where do I learn this, right? So it's a distributed system. In both the thing that there's many different parts of it, but also sometimes the kid is teaching other people. Sometimes he's being taught by other people. Sometimes the teacher is a computer or a digital media. Sometimes it's a video. Sometimes it's a person. Sometimes it's all three. And this system was not designed by the Dota company. It's self-organized bottom-up by the players and kept together by the players. However, the Dota company designers helped design it by making the game and by helping this get started, right? So another way to put this is, if we're going to face this world of interacting complex systems, we need to start thinking of our job as not training teachers and not just writing curriculum, but building learning systems and seeing teachers as designers of learning systems. And by the way, just like game designers, they shouldn't do that alone. They should do it in camaraderie with fellow designers, right? Now, I am not saying you have to build a learning teaching system. You have to have a game. All you have to have is an interesting set of well-designed problems. See, all a game is a set of problems that are well-designed to start off the process. And then around that game, you build the whole system. They're what I call the seed. Remember, I told you humans don't think well unless they have a problem to solve, an action to take the care about. The game is supplying that. You could supply that out at the pond. You could supply it any place. You should supply it in multiple ways. I'm not being game-centric. The only interesting thing about a game is it can sometimes supply a problem space that no human has ever seen before. So you can be an electron, right? See, you might think, given what you said, it's going to be hard for kids to think about electrons because they could never have experienced them. Well, now they can. There's games where you get to be the electron. Or you can be a wolf leading a pack or a firefly looking for a mate. An example of this, just to show you that this is a game, Portal, really lovely game where you play with the physics. It's a commercial game. It's all about playing with the physics of a world. Right? And so the seed, the problem set is, how do you have this portal gun in which you can make two portals, an orange and a blue one. If you go in one, you come out the other. And they obey certain laws of physics, like the conservation of momentum. So you have to figure out how to solve problems of moving around this world that way. And so the problem set is physics. However, people have built around the game, because they've got a passion for it, sites to explicate the real physics. That is, so even though the game does not say you have to talk physics, you have to write physics, what happens is outside the game, in this distributed system, all sorts of people, the players, are explicating the physics. There are even educators who set up sites to use the game as its problem seed, and then are setting up wikis and all sorts of stuff for people to explicate the physics around it. This, by the way, just a little advertisement. If you've never played a game, play this one. This isn't a game for education, but it's as fun as any entertainment game, called Dragon Box. It teaches algebra. It's made by Danes, I believe, so you must know this game. Does anybody know this game? This is a revered game now, and it just kind of got bought by the Gates Foundation. But you can go on to the app stores and get a version of this game, Dragon Box, which will show you a perfect match of learning where the game is incredibly fun, but explicates for you at a very deep level what does it mean to do algebra, in a way in which for the first time in your life you get it. It's a beautiful game. This is another game. This is not a commercial game per se. It's called Fold It. This is a new trend where people, the scientists who study protein folds, have the problem that you need to know the shape the protein folds into to have its effect, and everything in your body is caused by proteins. But unfortunately, there's hundreds to thousands of chemicals in any protein, and they could fold into billions upon billions of different shapes. So you have to find just the right one, the low energy state. So they use supercomputers to do that. And this game had the idea, why not make a nice little 3D protein and see if human beings could fold it using their pattern recognition to find the right fold. Because every time you fold a little piece, if it's a lower energy state than it was before, it turns blue. And essentially the puzzle is, can you find a way to get it all blue, right? Out of billions of possibilities. This has been massively successful. The players of this game have published 2 articles in Nature, the most prestigious journal in science, for their discoveries. And they recently discovered the proper fold for the protein that causes AIDS, which has eluded scientists for 20 years. And it's been validated. And in contests with the scientists who bring their supercomputers, in the last contest, the players took 7 of the top 10 slots. They don't have PhDs. They don't have certificates. They don't know chemistry per se. But they didn't do it individually, because just as I've told you, they didn't just play the game. They went into guilds. They helped each other learn some chemistry. They got into guilds to share, oh, this worked for me. They created this distributed learning system with tutorials and help and coaching and collaborative work. And the people who solved that age thing was a guild, really. Right? So here, everyday people, and this is a common phenomena in the world, everyday people with a good tool where they get to create a powerful distributed teaching and learning system can compete with any expert. That sort of collective intelligence is on the verge of always beating the experts. Right? This is all out of school, of course. There's a lot of this type of science. There's one called Galaxy Zoo, where people were just supposed to sort galaxies, but have actually got so into it they've discovered 3 new classes of galaxies. See, if you have a PhD, worry. All right, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that, which means it's over. Thank you.